Hi, Stephen. How are you?
How are you? Pretty good. How are you?
Yeah, not bad.
But are we the only ones here?
Yeah, just you and I.
Few of them coming on now. There's Peter.
Hi, Mark. Hi, Stephen.
How's it going?
Hi, Peter.
We'll give everyone a couple of minutes to join up. Jenny and Jeff have not joined yet.
There's a message from Jenny. In the moderators section, there's a message from Jenny saying, "Are you there, Peter?"
There's Jeff. Hi, Jeff.
Hello.
We are waiting on Jenny from the ATO to join us as well. And then I'll kick it off. I'm not sure whether Jenny is joining because she's having some issues with logging in from her site. So maybe we'll start without her because we've already got people online. So this webinar is mainly to talk about document digitization in local government. And the panel I have today have quite a bit of experience in this area from various aspects of local government. Before I get to that, I'd just like to share a few things. This webinar, some administrative stuff. So this webinar will go for maybe half an hour to 45 minutes. And there will be a recording for those who are unable to participate. We have a good forum today of people who have logged on, who are interested to know more. And we'll also be publishing this webinar on our LinkedIn pages. All the participants will be on mute, but please feel free to post any questions in the chat room column, and we'll try to answer this during the session, time permitting, failing which we will answer them with a follow-up email. So as mentioned in the webinar invitation, this session is mainly about a conversation. It's not about presenting slides. It's talking about document digitization and automation initiatives in local councils across Australia. And one of the key initiatives in this area is the PEPPOL based e-initiative, which I was hoping that Jenny would be able to talk through because she's the one who's taking the lead on that from an ATO point of view. But she hasn't been able to log in today, but that's all right. So I'll just briefly introduce the panel. So I have Stephen Fernando, who is the Director of Corporate Services at the Murray River Council. And Stephen has a lot of experience. I mean, if I go to introduce all the speakers with a lengthy profile will probably exhaust the time that we have for the webinar. So I'll keep it short, but you will hear when everyone on the panel talks the experience and the skills they come with. So Stephen, thank you for taking time off to be on this webinar. We also have
Absolutely.
Mark, who is a seasoned consultant who has worked on numerous tech projects in local and state government, and now works as a program manager across multiple projects and multiple customers. Jenny, as I said, was from the ATO, and she takes the lead on local government initiatives on a specific area of digitization, which is the eInvoicing PEPPOL-based initiative. And then, of course, we have from our very own B2BE, Jeff Martin, who is our CTO, who has, shall I say, decades of experience in all types of digitization and automation. And Jeff, I'd like you to share some stories with us in specific to this area as well, maybe from the New Zealand point of view as well, and other projects you worked on. But I'll get to that as we go on. So let me start with Stephen first. So Stephen, can you tell me what are some of the areas that you see from an operational point of view that would help local councils to improve their digital footprint within the council and within the other stakeholders like their customers and suppliers and stuff, that would have an immediate impact on those stakeholders, be it customers, suppliers, or even your internal stakeholders?
Yeah, thanks, Peter. I guess you just apply the same questions that you would in any automation project. There are certain processes that are more easily automated or lend themselves to automation better than others. One question to ask is it a highly structured project? Is it a highly structured process? Is it a process that has multiple touch points across different departments? The reason for that question is because that is likely to deliver better value than something that is just with two people. Yeah, I guess the final question is how much of current paper-based processes or paper-based actions are in that process. And again, that helps to deliver a better return on an investment you make in digitizing that process. Now, if you look at I'll just stick to local government because that's where I'm from. If you look at that, we have obvious area which really relates to PEPPOL is in incoming accounts payable process where invoices come in from suppliers, and we have this process internally to deal with that until we end up paying the supplier for that invoice. So that's an obvious thing. But if you go to other areas, we have most local governments will have something called a set of registers, whether they are digital registers or paper registers. And that could be anything from cat and dog registrations to backflow prevention devices. If you have water, even if you don't have water, that's with local government. We have to do other things like on-site storage systems that we have to keep a track of. All of those things, and they have stakeholders externally, mostly customers or your ratepayers, and all of those things have to go through multiple departments within council, as well as interact with outsiders, and that they lend themselves quite nicely because they are all structured processes. Some of them will even have the specific form specified by the state government that has to be used to undertake those reporting activities. So it's very well structured, those things, and they lend quite well to automation.
Okay. Mark, since you have been involved in many projects in local and state government. Do you have anything to add or complement what Stephen has already said?
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Look, I think when we come to automation and the digitization I think that's the trend where a lot of organisations, including councils, are going through to. I think the part is, in my observations, it comes down to the people in that organisation and their propensity for that digitisation. You know, you'll have certain managers that want to innovate and look for improvements, right? And we need to be conscious that improvements come from multiple parts. It's not just technology. No, it's people, process, data, and technology, and they all need to work together. I totally agree with Stephen that we need to be conscious, and if we take the procure to pay space, that's an area where there is significant gains can be made in the whole digitization. It's around the world area of focus where significant improvements can be made, and you can actually quantify the benefits in a lot of those areas. So on one part, it's actually fairly easy to put a business case up. The challenge is to actually implement and realize those benefits. You're dealing with people that were manually doing those activities and then telling them that we're going to have a system to do that, and we're not going to take your job away, but what we're going to do is move away from you being a data enter to actually analyze that data. So we move from transactional to a little bit more strategic, and we are able to make better informed decisions, right? So I think the challenge we need to do is there is a fear in organizations around that shift, and what does that mean for their people, especially in councils. So we need to understand, as part of the technology and the process improvements, we also need to consider the organizational impact, and what does that mean in terms of a future blueprint when we start making these changes. I'm actually working with a council right at the moment, and we're finishing the analysis on a market scan on that whole digitization of, you know, invoicing through to payment. And again, technology will get us part of the way, but if we don't look at it as part of the end-to-end process and then have the process improvements match that technology, you're only going to get one side of that equation.
Yep.
So that's my sort of takeouts from this conversation.
Yeah. That's really interesting, Mark, because you know, adding to what Stephen and you both said, in my travels, I also find that, you know, most of these councils and other government, state and federal agencies, they may be not ready yet for PEPPOL based in e-invoicing, but they have an existing process in place. Maybe good, maybe not so good, but so you have to take into consideration how do we move forward with the existing process, which could be a scanning process of invoices that come in. Do we have a system that complements that existing solution plus bring in a PEPPOL-based process into it? So lots of things to consider. Stephen, anything you want to add there? Again, I'm very interested to know, because both Mark and you have both practical experience, which is really useful for our forum to you know, latch on to and learn a few things.
Yeah, just a quick couple of things on what Mark said. First, about the quantifying the benefits. Yeah, be a little careful that you don't promise to deliver benefits that doesn't get delivered in the short term, especially. For instance, I know sometimes you get calculations to say, okay, we will save so much of labor time, depending on the transaction time. But the fact is that labor time may be coming from 5 different people with 10% of their time or something like that, which means that you're not going to really generate any cost savings on employee costs in the short term, because you're not going to fire any one of those 5 people. And anyway, that's not a very good way to sort of build your case, scare the people. It's you identify those savings, and in the long term, as you automate more and more processes, then you might be able to reduce your FTEs, and you can do that through natural attrition. But in the shorter term, the benefits you're getting is better engagement with your customers, better customer experience, and sometimes they're not necessarily easy to quantify, but they are definitely things that are valued, especially by the top end of your organization, whether it's the senior management or even the counselors. If you have to send, if you can get to the counselors and say, look, this will enhance the experience of our customers, make it a lot easier, that's valuable to the counselors.
Absolutely. And I don't mean to sound cliched here, but with the COVID-based stuff that has been going on for years, lots of people working remotely, having that infrastructure that is available internally is sometimes not available to staff who work remotely. So digitization, trying to move to a paperless environment, not having printers at home and scanners at home. If there's a better way of doing it, a more efficient way of doing it, why not? Jeff, getting to you, we've had some interesting insights here from Mark and Stephen from a vendor/tech/CTO point of view. Can you briefly talk us through some of the maybe PEPPOL-based stuff or other projects that we are involved with, that B2B is involved with, and some of the challenges and maybe some of the tips and tricks you could offer this audience? You're on mute, Jeff.
Sorry about that, guys. Some very good points made there by Stephen and Mark, and I agree completely. There's quite a bit of buzz around e-invoicing and the focus on it, especially from the government at the moment. Ultimately, e-invoicing isn't a new thing. We've been helping companies do e-invoicing for more than 20 years via EDI. I guess the thing that's really come out of this is a few years back, the Australian and New Zealand government sort of joined forces and have decided on the PEPPOL network, which I think is a good move, a good mature network. And really the network and processes are in place now at that level. And it's really time to try and get some adoption across both councils, government and businesses. Right. The term e-invoicing is an interesting one. As you talk to your suppliers and during this adoption process, they'll say, "Oh, we're already e-invoicing ready. We've been doing it for years." You dig a little bit deeper, and really what they're saying is they haven't been sending paper-based invoices for years. The computer generating PDFs and sending them to you via email. On your end, you're still needing to take that and OCR it or do manual keying or something into your system before you can actually start processing that invoice. And what you also find is as the suppliers are sort of moving into this, their system will have some of the data, but some of it might already be in like the letterhead on the PDF. So things like ABN numbers, GST numbers, maybe even the company name are actually part of the PDF, and that they need to make sure that they'll be able to send you through a full set of the data that you need. I guess funny coming from the tech guy, but the technology part should be the easiest part. That's pretty set in place. Providers like us, can effectively connect to you in whatever way you need to connect, in whatever data format you need to connect. It doesn't matter if it's in-house, in the cloud. We'll sort that side of it out and take that data and convert it into a format that's compliant for the PEPPOL network. Really, your challenges are, like Stephen and Mark have pointed out, the data that you're getting and your internal processes. There was an ANZ working group set up a couple of years ago who went through the data, and there was an e-invoice guideline. and that sort of outlines the mandatory data, the best practice, and the optional data. Definitely worth getting a copy of that document and going through it, and then seeing how that aligns with your accounts payable process. I guess a couple of things we're seeing in the market. Big companies who already have established EDI, they just view the PEPPOL network as another channel. So they really don't care whether you're going to send them or you're sending them or they're sending you the invoice via EDI or via the PEPPOL network. It really doesn't make a lot of difference to them. Likewise, software providers like MYOB and Xero, they've made their systems eInvoice capable. So the smaller suppliers that are on those platforms, really they should just be able to say, this customer is, I want to interact with eInvoicing, and it will go through the PEPPOL network, and it should be that simple. So ultimately, I think the move to eInvoicing, and especially on the PEPPOL network, will bring you advantages. It'll give you good, clean data in a timely way, and in the long term, should really simplify your AP process.
Oh, that's good feedback, Jeff. Stephen, getting back to you now, how do you, from a council point of view, prioritize projects when there are combinations of projects that need to be completed, but then other projects come along that are mandated or become high priority while you're right in the middle of another project? Is there a delicate balance between people resources and other infrastructure resources that you have to contend with, and how do you deal with that? I'm sure the audience would love to know, some practical experience.
Yeah, two aspects there, Peter, to look at. One is there are multiple levels of prioritization, especially within a local government sector. The first one will be the annual budget, capital budgeting process. This will have to get into that process, compete with all the other capital projects that a council has to do, from maintaining roads to water and sewer and whatever else. So to get into that process. From a size perspective, if you're just looking at the AP and PEPPOL process, it's not going to be large. So it's there. And I guess one of the drivers for getting some priority for that project is, for some agencies, it's mandatory now. And for local governments, it will soon become mandatory. So it's you don't have much of a choice that you have to do that. And to that extent, I would say, start early. Don't underestimate the time that you need to do a project like this. And when I say project, I'm not just talking about starting the project and finishing the project. That is just a small component of the bigger piece, where you have to go through the organization, build your case, and get things approved. Then, of course, the other level is you have limited resources in your IT department or people who can supply that. So after getting the capital project done, you have to go through the same process of getting it prioritized within your IT department as well. And then you will probably have lots of various options, various ideas for automation within your organization, and then where does the AP process. And again, a lot of those things, the best way to sort of push it up is to say that it will soon get mandated, the AP at least. And I wouldn't wait until something comes along, say it's going to be essential or mandatory for local governments to do this, to start on the process, because you might have at best a year and you might struggle to get something done with all those approvals if you have done nothing, and then you wait till that mandate comes to make the first step in the process.
Right. Okay. Mark, do you obviously have worked on various projects in local government that have had to deal with limited resources internally? What any tips and tricks you can give the audience on how to execute and manage such projects when they work with people like yourselves? Because they've got their day-to-day stuff to deal with as well, right?
Oh, absolutely, and it doesn't just go for document digitization. It's a challenge across all customers, councils in particular, about how do they manage the business as usual and engaged on projects. Now, coming to Stephen's point, you got to also look at the size of these projects, because there's different layers of size. So if you're talking something like a full ERP, where an organisation may do one every 10, 15 years, the project consumes a lot of the best resources required, and that organisation tends not to be able to resource that. Most organisations are already resource poor, and then you're adding layers. If I come back to the digitisation, I think the fundamentals here is the business case. The business case, if done well, drives the reason why we're doing it, from a strategic and a tactical and an operation. The business case then provides what is required to meet success. Now, the business case on its own needs to be supported by something much higher, and that is, what is the strategy within that organisation around its digitisation? We're seeing greater demands from the community and customers to being able to have and staff to being able to work in a Facebook world, if I put it that way, or an Amazon world or a Google world. That's what they're used to outside of an organisation. So they expect some of that within the organisation. So the first point is, really, an organisation should have a clear digitisation strategy. And then from that, if we look at, say, some of the digitisation in the accounts or the finance space, it makes that job easier to sell the business case, because you already have an overarching strategy, and that strategy has identified what are the actions that it needs to be done over that year, and they should already then be funded within that in the ideal world. The business case, whether it has that or not, is again the instrument to define your scope, define why we're doing it, and define how you're doing it. And when we come to the how, then we start looking at the resourcing. So again, we need to understand, when these businesses cases are put up, not all business cases are equal, and therefore we need to understand the prioritization, not just because of the value, but the impact on the resources that are in an organization that only has finite resources. So clear resource plans that are going to deliver against that business case, and identifying the stakeholders, being clear on your sponsorship so that you have the support when things go wrong, which they will as part of a project, understanding the size and complexity and the risk profile with that project. These are all project management things, but they also support the resourcing view, right? Because it defines the commitment, defines the complexity, and out that we can have a clear understanding of the resources down to the who would be required, whether internal in the organisation or capabilities and capacity required outside of the organisation. And we also need to bring the vendor into this. The vendor has strong knowledge and skills. They've done this multiple times, and that needs to be leveraged, that experience, as part of the implementation, and may even have to contribute to some of that resourcing gap that an organisation may have. And at the end of the day, that all represents then, have we budgeted enough for the right investment for the right outcome?
Yep.
Yeah, Mark, that's a good point that you made about the overall strategy, because depending on whether you're looking at just doing the mandated section about AP and PEPPOL and stopping there, or whether you have a broader plan for general digitization, will mean very significantly different to how you set about the project. Even just for the AP section, how you set about it will be very different. The types of vendors you will look at it is different. So that whether you have that strategy and understanding of where you're going will impact almost every aspect of the project. So that's an important aspect. Yeah.
Okay. I had a couple of questions for Jenny which would have definitely been useful for the audience, because it's coming from the ATO's point of view, which is the other side of the equation. They are the ones who are, governing and looking after this whole initiative. So what I will do is I will speak with Jenny and get some of the answers that I had for that she had for those questions, and then send it out to the audience, because it'll be interesting to get a perspective from the ATO point of view as well. But I'll spin one of those questions around and ask you, Stephen, from an ATO point of view, what are some of the the discussions, initiatives that have happened from the ATO to local governments? Have they reached out to you guys? Are they talking to you saying, hey, yeah, you need to watch out for this, it's coming, look out for it, stuff like that? Or what's the take on that?
Yes, there has been some initiatives from them. Remembering, of course, that the ATO is just focusing on the AP process, not all of those other processes. Just to give a quick background, PEPPOL is a standard. It's not really a product or anything like. It's a standard, and it's a worldwide standard. I think something like 40 countries have adopted the standard, and in fact, Australia and New Zealand coming at this point is certainly not one of the first movers. So it's a very well understood and a standard that has been there for a while. ATO has mandated, and through the government process, all federal agencies are already mandated to use that. I think it's this year for the federal agencies, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, mid-year, I think.
Yeah, the New South Wales state government is the first state government to mandate it for all state-based organizations within New South Wales. I am not, and that's ahead of what the federal government will do, because eventually the federal government will say all states agencies have to do that as well. But New South Wales has set its own date, which is ahead of what the federal would say. And shortly, local governments will be required to do that as well. Looks like Jenny is
here.
Hey,
Jenny is here.
Hi there.
Can add something.
Hi. I can ask you your questions there. Sorry, Stephen.
No, that's fine.
Yeah, that's very interesting feedback, I think, for the audience as well, because it's important to know what's mandated and what's not mandated, and where you could take the initiatives if you have to, which will benefit the organization, whether it's mandated or not, right? So that's a huge benefit. Jenny, if you're ready for a couple of questions, I'll shoot now.
Sure.
Okay. So can you, we've got a really good audience here, and I guess it's because of the panel that I invited, because you have, all of you have a lot of practical experience. This is not theory we are talking about. So from the council side, we've had some excellent feedback, and also Jeff's given us some great feedback on, from a vendor, implementer, consultant scenario, how we handle that, and some tips and tricks. From your point of view, can you talk us through the work the ATO team is doing with councils to encourage them to become e-invoicing enabled? Are there any pointers you can give the audience on how to get started, or some tips and tricks?
Yeah, absolutely. Sure, Peter, and apologies for my delayed arrival.
No worries at all.
And hello, everyone who's in this forum. I'm very pleased to be representing the ATO eInvoicing local government adoption team in this forum. So I just wanted to provide some context in terms of the policy framework for eInvoicing at the outset. It's a key element of the government's digital economy strategy, which is aimed at driving productivity by accelerating the digital transformation of Australian businesses. So in the 2020-21 federal budget, the government announced a mandate for all Commonwealth agencies to adopt eInvoicing by the 1st of July this year. And the objective of that is to encourage greater adoption amongst businesses supplying to government and to encourage adoption within their supply chains. But I'd just like to make a very important point at this stage for this audience. The adoption of e-invoicing is not mandatory for local government organisations at this stage. It's not mandatory. Now, we don't know if or when it's going to happen, but as we say to all the councils we meet with, it is best to be prepared and on the front foot regardless. So in terms of the current state of affairs in terms of e-invoicing, I can provide a quick snapshot of what's happening across government and business. Given the Commonwealth mandate, there are currently 42 federal government agencies and 5 corporates that are enabled. At the state government level in New South Wales, which mandated e-invoicing adoption to take effect last month, there are 44 agencies that are enabled. Other state and territory governments are at various stages of considering it. And we're also seeing a lot of activity in the local government domain, which I'll tell you a bit more about shortly. I did want to bring to everyone's attention the fact that Treasury is currently consulting on supporting business adoption of e-invoicing. The responses are due by the 25th of this month, so you've still got time to have a look on the Treasury website for the consultation documentation. I think it'll provide you with some interesting insights and the opportunity to comment as well. So in terms of what's happening on the business side of e-invoicing, the major SME accounting packages, and that we've highlighted Xero, MyOp and Recon, but there are others, are ready now to support e-invoicing. And the number of enabled businesses is steadily starting to grow. And as evidence, I can tell you that in January last year, there were just 200 businesses registered on the PEPPOL directory. That's the directory which lists all the Australian businesses that are enabled. Just 12 months later, and in the absence of any large-scale awareness activities, there are over 11,000 businesses registered on the directory. So this year, we're going to kick off an economy-wide e-invoicing awareness activity with a strong focus on small businesses. So that means there'll soon be a significant increase in suppliers who've heard about e-invoicing and its benefits, are e-invoicing enabled, want to be able to send and receive e-invoices, and they'll also expect faster turnarounds as a result of more streamlined and automated processes. So that's just a quick snapshot at the outset. Thanks, Peter.
Okay. The second question for you, Jenny, I think you've covered a little bit of it in your first one anyway. So every council obviously has combinations of suppliers, right? The large suppliers, value-wise as well as volume-wise. So what advice would you give these councils on how to test an e-invoice with maybe a small group of suppliers? Do you recommend a high volume or high value type suppliers, or any tips and tricks in that area?
Yes, well, look, onboarding your high volume and or high value suppliers early will certainly help both your council and your supplier to realise those efficiencies and benefits sooner rather than later. So engage your suppliers early and let them know your council's intention to become e-invoicing enabled. Even if you're at the start of your journey. The key to a successful project is communication. So that includes both within your council, among your colleagues, and with your suppliers. And remember that to send and receive e-invoices, both the buyer and seller have got to be enabled. So onboarding your suppliers to e-invoicing is essential to your implementation and how quickly you and your suppliers will start to benefit from it. And I guess we'd say too that it's not a one-time activity. So we've got some tips. Start early in parallel with your technical implementation, because your suppliers will need the same amount of time to get ready as well.
Yep.
Understand your council's supplier landscape for onboarding. And as part of that, we recommend that you segment and prioritise suppliers. For example, those high volume, high frequency suppliers, those who are already enabled, those who already use major accounting software packages to invoice, and so on. Plan out your onboarding activity to progressively onboard. And look, I might say at this point, we do have some fantastic resources available on GovTeams, a whole suite of communication plans and templates that you can actually use and tailor them to your own purposes to do this. So we're happy to help you with that. So you need to, as already stated, you need to communicate with everyone. And don't forget, once you're enabled, to publish that status on your website, as well as guidance for your suppliers on how they can exchange e-invoices with you. But do remember that this work will need to be properly resourced to be done effectively in a timely manner. That's very important. Your own procurement teams will know and manage the relationships with your suppliers, so get them involved early to support your project with onboarding them. And of course, we're mindful you'll inevitably still have a small number of suppliers who are never going to graduate from paper invoices. So I think that's just a fact of life. So thanks, Peter.
Thank you.
Peter, a couple of things on what Jenny said. One is on the selection of the pilot suppliers. Just a slightly different view from me. I wouldn't really worry about the volume or the value. The whole idea of a pilot is to demonstrate and demonstrate to the rest of the organization that this is working well. So I would say just focus on the suppliers who are most likely to support you in this process.
Okay.
Doesn't matter whether they are high volume or high value or in between. And certainly some criteria that you can think of is what Jenny said. Are they already using a system that is enabled to do this, so that they switch? They don't have a lot of work to do to switch. So anybody on, like you said, Myob or Xero or people like that, those products are already enabled to do this. It's an easier step for the suppliers. Pick a few suppliers that you believe would support this project, so that you can demonstrate a smooth functioning project, so that then that can be a catalyst to get the other people on board.
Yep. Great.
And one other stakeholder sometimes that we forget, and Jenny, maybe this is something for you to make a note of for your communications as well. So before I came to New South Wales, I was with the Queensland Council. And one of the things I did was, one of the key stakeholders are the auditors. It's a big change for the auditors. Remember that there is no PDF or a paper document for them to look at and audit and say, this is all they have will be a string of data that represents an invoice. And that's a big change for them to audit. So I contacted my auditors, and they contacted the Queensland Audit Office. And neither of them had heard about this initiative at all, right? So maybe, Jenny, one of the stakeholders that you need to contact is all the Auditor Generals in each of the states, and inform them of this, because they will be a key stakeholder in getting this done.
Sure. Good point.
Okay. Good
Yeah,
point.
like I know here in New Zealand, basically the New Zealand government are targeting accountants with a lot of education around the e-invoicing, because they figure companies will go to their accountants to find out what's this e-invoicing thing around. So yeah, they're putting the education into the accountants to then help that flow through to business.
Yep. Excellent points there. Wow, this 40 minutes has gone by very quickly with some very practical and useful information. So I'm going to summarize this and put all of you on the spot here with my final summary. I would like to ask all my panel members, and maybe we'll start with Mark, to give our audience 3 tips on how to go about prioritizing e-invoicing with their respective councils and ensuring their suppliers are keen to comply as well. I know most of those were covered, but just give me very brief bullet points, starting with you, Mark.
You need a strong business sponsor. They're the ones at the business level that need to identify the problem or the opportunity, and then work with IT or the business analyst to then bring that to fruition. So strong business sponsorship is key. Organizational support around these types of innovations, as you know, automation and digitization is going to be becoming part of organizational DNA. So having a clear strategic view on that, and just make sure you do your due diligence when you're looking for opportunities or offers, and consider it not just in its myopic, but look at it as part of the bigger picture. Even though you might be wanting to just deliver this piece, you still need to understand the larger piece to understand the future proof and how that may be able to deliver other things as part of that complete value chain.
Thank you, Mark. Stephen?
Yeah, just a bit of repetition, obviously, from what said. Yeah, have a start with the strategy, overall strategy, not just for AP and PEPPOL, but the overall strategy for digitization. That's very important. And then the next one I would say is just build support. The sponsor is an important element of the support. You need to build support within the AP, within procurement. You need to build support with your auditors. You need to build support with at least a small group of your key suppliers who will support or who will lend their support to this whole process. So look at it from a much broader view of building support from multiple stakeholders, and then just make sure you plan it out properly. It's not going to be a 2-month project. You need to put in the time up front if you want to avoid pain later on.
Okay, thank you. Jeff?
Yeah, so touching on what Mark had said earlier, you know, look at your wider strategy. It's not all about e-invoicing, it's about other things as well. So especially as you're looking at your vendor to be your access provider into the network, you know, look at the other capabilities that they have and services that they provide to meet your overall strategy. I would certainly target friendly suppliers that are already either doing it or are properly ready to go, and that will make the pain a bit less as you start testing it out and proving your process. And like I sort of said earlier in my bit, you know, look at the data. You need to make sure that the data that you're getting aligns with your current accounts payable processes. So you really get to understand that quite well.
Okay, thanks, Jeff.
So one more thing, Peter, something that local governments don't look at too much, but there is legislative requirements around it. It's a process called Know Your Suppliers. You need to know who your suppliers is, and by that I mean you need to check that they're not engaged in terrorism, money laundering, human rights abuses, all of those things. But also from an internal point of view, you need to be able to verify that you're paying the person for fraud control and things like that. Understand which bank accounts they are using, who's the authorized person to change those bank accounts, etc. And this digitization process helps with a lot of that. There are products out there that you, or services out there that you can use almost automatically to conform to the know your vendor requirements or know your supplier requirements.
Okay, great. That's an excellent point, actually.
Yeah, likewise, we have to do KYC checks to bring you onto the PEPPOL network as well.
Yeah. It's the other way around for you. Yeah.
So, Jenny, I'll make you lucky last. There are a couple of questions that I won't take here, but rest assured I will get back to you with all the answers. Kay has asked, Jenny, are you able to provide a link to some of the tips you suggested? And Anne-Marie's already jumped onto that, saying that we'll send them some information. Jenny, you've given us some really valuable insights here. Do you have anything else to add in summary?
Well, look, I think in terms of moving forward, number one, make supplier onboarding a key element of your overall project plan. Create that prioritisation list to inform and guide your selection of suppliers to onboard. Consider those that you know are already enabled or have a digital capability, and test sending and receiving invoices with a small group first before you roll it out more broadly. And be proactive. Progress your onboarding in parallel with a technical implementation, and get on the front foot in preparing to receive e-invoices from your suppliers. And finally, I'd like to add that the local government adoption team is here to support you. And I think we've put up the email address there, eInvoicing@ato.gov.au, and we can give you access to all those wonderful resources that have been developed, and also answer any questions you have that relate to your unique situation. So all I can say is, on behalf of the ATO local government adoption team, good luck as you embark on your e-invoicing journey, and have some fun. Thanks.
Oh, thanks, Jenny. And in summary, from a B2BE point of view, I think Jeff and I want to thank everyone here for being on this session. Thank you very much for the panel members who've given of your time. Jenny, definitely, it's been awesome having you on this panel as well. For the audience, there's heaps and heaps of information on the ATO website in relation to this particular initiative of PEPPOL. But by all means, talk to Stephen, Mark. Even if you want to talk to us, that's fine, on your digital journey. B2BE has been in the business for, 20 plus years now. We work across 20 geographies worldwide, do a lot of business in this document digitization and automation space. So feel free to reach out to us as part of your due diligence and looking for partners to work with. I'll leave it at that, and I'll follow up with a copy of the webinar itself that maybe you can pass on to other stakeholders as well. And once again, Mark, Stephen, Jeff, and Jenny, thank you so much for your time, and thank you to the audience as well. This brings us to the end of this webinar. Bye for now.
Thank you, Peter. Happy to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Okay.